taxation, gender equality, and sustainable development. Of course, it is under the auspices of the Network for Women's Rights in Ghana, also known as NetRight. Now, yesterday we started the conference. It was a good one. We had a great time, and I believe we stayed with time, sort of. Today, we'll go straight to the point and ensure that we finish early and then we can go home. Yesterday, we looked at a number of topics, including the UN Tax Convention and its potential impact on developing countries. We also looked at global tax trends and their impact on national tax systems. Also, women, financial precarity and taxation towards a gender-sensitive approach to tax policy and fiscal planning. In a bit, I'll take you through what we'll be looking at today. But before we do that, we want to do a recap of day one. So this is where I need you back on track to see whether yesterday we had some great takeaways, and then we do a bit of sharing, and then we'll look at what we have on the table today. Right. I think this is not good. Okay. So if I can have my sweet ladies to help me with the microphone, we'll go around quickly and then we'll do a bit of highlights from yesterday. Yesterday, you were all fantastic. You all contributed nicely and gave us some great reviews and all that. So we'll just do a recap and then we'll go straight to today, the business of the day today. So if I can please have So we'll start from this side. Some of the key highlights for you yesterday from what we had, our discussions, 3 sessions, a number of presentations, lovely questions, great responses from our panel throughout the day. I'll start with this gentleman because yesterday he made a lot of great contributions and all that, and he'll take us through some of his key takeaways from yesterday and his expectations for today. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning.
Good
My
morning.
name is Samuel Harrison Kujo. So yesterday, one of the key things for me was about the fact that our tax laws were gender neutral, and that in a way didn't it doesn't work well for women and women-owned businesses, and there was the need for us to, one, deliberately ensure some kind of gender consideration when we are working on taxation. We should simplify taxation so that everybody can get in there. And then the whole issue around tax returns, filing tax returns, the fact that it's a cumbersome process here in Ghana, people are not used to doing it, and our GRA isn't stepping out enough to, get Ghanaians to come and file their taxes. They should let us know what is in it for us when we are coming to file our returns. That is what would encourage people to step up and then file their returns so that they get the data that they need to enable them plan properly. So that was shortly what I got yesterday. Thank you.
All right, great. I think you got it well. So we spoke about data, we spoke about the informal sector. Our focus was on low-income households, right? The informal sector. We also spoke about strategies to pull them on board. And then there was the issue of not confusing social protection and a gender tax regime, right? I'm just trying to wake up some of the memories for you. So we've done one guy. I think we have to speak to a woman now because this conference is for us, whether they like it or not. And they are supporting us because they love us. So thank you for loving us, men. So let me go to the second table. I see my two sisters there smiling. They will give us their takeaway from yesterday.
Thank you very much. My name is Patience Lamte from Yo. Okay, so my takeaway yesterday was that there are a lot of women at the informal sector, and the only thing that can help them, be enrolled into the tax nets is to take them through sensitization. Of course, if I'm a market woman, I know why I should pay taxes, the benefit and what have you. I will do it gladly. And then also, I also learned that with the issue of the informal sector, which is the market women, government is supposed to put measures in place, unlike the formal sector where we have these women benefiting from tax reliefs and other things. Those are the informal sector, they have no clue as to what is happening, and so it's still boiled down to sensitization. We should widen our sensitization network so that we can rope in more women, and we should also consider women whenever policies on taxes are put in place.
Thank you, Patience.
Good morning. My name is Adoma. So what stood out for me yesterday was the UN Tax Convention. So yesterday, I learned that the purpose of the UN Tax Convention was to bring about inclusivity. And then the fact that most of the policies benefit those in the global south. So this convention is to help the developing countries and others to catch up and also benefit from what the others are also getting. And then what also stood out for me was the panel discussion, the first one, on the what's Mr. Noe and the tax justice.
That was global tax trends, the impact on national taxes.
Yes, I think that was what really stood out for me, and the fact that sometimes you feel like something else is going on in another country, but indirectly it also affects you. Looking at the tax system, the various ones that we can learn from, that of South Africa and then I think Kenya, that we can learn from the digital tax and then the world tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Scholars Day here. Okay, can we wrap up with this section? I think we can. The gentleman in the suit. Yes, thank you.
So, yesterday I had a rare opportunity to get a refresher on my tax knowledge. Many of the things that I learned in taxation, I've forgotten them. Issues like tax, is it transfer pricing? A whole lot of concepts which I'm still struggling to grapple with. And I was also enthused by the presentations that were made by this person from the Ministry of Finance on the UN Tax Convention and the importance of the convention to our tax reforms. I was also happy to know that although taxation or tax is gender neutral, we are trying to change the conversation to ensure that there's equity in our tax policies. I think this is the few things that I took from yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Will we have a second person from that table, or we should move on? Okay. Echo. The conference is for us women, so tell us your key highlights. Maybe there was something you felt we left out, we should include today or something. So I'm insisting, I can see two women on that table. One of you should speak and then I'll move on.
I think mostly they have said all what I took. So just to just to add a bit from the panel discussions, I also realized that we are not just advocating for tax incentives as women, but we are saying that we should be given a place on the table where these policies are made, so that, in fact, to speak in tree, say so that we can also, we understand ourselves and what we want. So when we sit there, we will know better what to put on the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Great submission. Thank you. Let's come to this side. We'll start from the back, the last table, come to the middle, and then Madam Patricia will wrap up for us. So the last table, my lovely panel member, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So for me, it's on the UN tax conventions and the need for us to all get involved in that space to influence what goes into tax conventions that govern all of us as well. And then also the fact that GOG is trying to put together a simpler form for women or people to fill out their tax, and the digital tax policy that is coming up is an eye-opener for us to really keep our eyes on there to see what goes in there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
What I learned from yesterday is the framework convention with protocols. And the protocols come in different, and they have the cross-border protocols. I think that digitalization is not yet completed. Then we have the International Tax Corporation. And the African aspect, we have about 54 countries. But Africa has 54, but we have other people including in the African setup. So we were discussing, we didn't have effect on the African, because when you talk about gender with the Arab countries, you don't talk about gender much. So that's what I learned. Secondly, I think I was saying they are simplifying the returns so that it will be easier for the informal sector or everybody to fill. That one, everybody will fill. And also we need to intensify the education to the informal sector, because you know the informal sector is made up of majority of women, and majority of women also are stressed out with other things apart from working. Other things also stress them out. So we have to do things that for them to understand it very well.
Thank you very much. Okay, Madam Patricia, you wrap up for us, then we start the program.
Okay, thank you. I think this means that yesterday our mind, body, and soul were in this room. And for me, what stood out was the tax reliefs and the fact that we are not aware, so we don't know what is in for us. So we don't. It's something that we don't consciously go our way out to say that we are filing our taxes. So this is something that has net right. We need to create more awareness around the tax reliefs and what we stand to gain if we file our taxes. I hope today's discussions will also be insightful, interesting, and I look forward to today's program.
Thank you very much, and thank you to you all. You've been great, and obviously we're all in it yesterday, and we're hoping today we'll do same. So I'll just run you through quickly what we have for today. We have 4 panel discussions. They are all between 30 and 90 minutes, so very quick. We have one on addressing illicit financial flows, gender dimensions, and impacts on DRM and sustainable development. We have one on tax exemptions and incentives, who benefits, who loses. We'll look at that. And then the big word in Ghana now, digitalization. We're doing one on that. So digital transformation in taxation, opportunities for us as women and the informal sector. And then our final panel will be on taxation, gender and economic justice, moving towards an inclusive tax system. So very packed, great discussions we're going to have today. Then we'll wrap up with a closing plenary, and then we'll look at the outcomes of the conference. So pretty straightforward. We'll start quickly with our first session, which is looking at addressing illicit financial flows, gender dimensions, and impact on GRM and sustainable development. So my very good friend is moderating this session. He's going to be looking at, for example, getting the panel to identify strategies to combat illicit flows, specific impact on women, linking tax policy, among others. So let me introduce the panel, then I'll introduce my very good friend who will be moderating. We have our very good friend. He was here with us yesterday. He's here with us today, Mr. Isaac Danso-Ejiri from TJNA. Let's welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you, Isaac, for being with us throughout. Then we have Madame Evelyn Donko. She's from Ghana's Financial Intelligence Center. Madame Evelyn, if you can join us. Thank you. Oh, are you fighting with Evelyn? Then the last but not the least is Mr. Samuel Harrison Kujo. He's with GACC. Mr. Harrison Kujo, can you join us? So you see, we've met Mr. Harrison, we've met Mr. Ejiri. It is Evelyn that we don't know very well. So Evelyn, welcome and thank you for joining us. Let me introduce our moderator for this session. You see him on TV every day, I believe. Or is it every day? Every night? You see him on TV every night, every day. He's passionate about what he does and he understands what he does. So he's a great person to moderate this session. Please help me welcome my good old friend and my brother, Mr. Alfred Okanse from TV3, to take us through this session. Alfred.
Thank you, V. Thank you. Good morning. Great. And just following up on the conversation that has been had since yesterday. And so just moving straight into it, I'll start off with you, Evelyn, because we haven't heard from you since morning. So give us the first word. To set the ball rolling, what are the various forms of IFFs that we see evident in Ghana now?
Okay, so IFF, I know some people are wondering what IFF is. It's illicit financial flows, and it's about transfer of funds to other jurisdiction through illegal means. IFF has dimensions. It could be for the dimensions are for the source of the funds, which would be legal or illegal. The transfer mode, which could be legal or illegal, and the use, which could be legal or illegal. So the forms, mostly what we have observed is that most of the funds, we call it trade-based money laundering. Some entities take advantage of the system and do misinvoicing, under-invoicing, and over-invoicing. And sometimes we have some of these illegal people also doing some smuggling businesses here and there. So basically the IFF is trading all right, but finding means to beat up the system such that you pay less funds. So I want to import some stuff into the country. I know I'll pay duties, so why don't I under invoice such that I'll pay less duties on them? I want to export. I know that if I increase my cost of exportation, I'm going to pay less, so why don't I reduce it so that I can get away with it? So basically, that's what I would say. I'll pass on to my fellow to add their word.
You passed it on without me, but anyway, yes. But there are other forms, because you touch on a lot more on tax under invoicing, and in some cases evasion of taxes as well. But then how about illegal mining, for instance, as another avenue of illicit financial flows?
Okay, so as I said, the dimensions could be the source, and we all know what we popularly call galamsey, the impact it's having on the environment. These people are not really able to sell to legitimate licensed people, buyers. So what do they have to do? They have to go to the black market to sell these, or sometimes they smuggle them out so that they can still benefit from the proceeds of these illegalities. So there are lots more. I just have restricted it. There is a lot more. In the extractive sector, we know some people are licensed, some are not licensed. So these illegal miners, they are not all unlicensed. They are doing illegal businesses. So they try to smuggle their way out, the whatever proceeds that they get, they just try to smuggle it out and do their own illegal business behind the scenes. Sometimes they sell it to these big companies who are licensed, but then they are not going to sell it at the market price because they know they are into illegalities. So all these form part of illicit financial flows, and they are all occurring here in Ghana. Thank you.
And the focus is on, and Isaac, how this also impacts on the domestic revenue mobilization efforts by government, and how it also, as a result, impacts on the delivery of certain services to all of us, and especially women. And so if you look at, for instance, maybe in instances of money laundering, which is another form of illicit financial flows, is it not? We see this playing out clearly in various sectors of the economy, and a lot of the money that is laundered when stand is washed, literally, in sectors like the real estate, where you see a lot of these apartments people have bought and nobody is living in it. And then also some other areas as well. So I want us to look at the money laundering as another IFF avenue, and how that is also affecting the domestic revenue mobilization efforts by government.
All right, thanks, Alfred. Good morning to all of you once again. IFFs, I mean, you're right about it. IFFs, monies that illicitly leaves the continent, denying us the opportunity to, as a country, but also as a continent, to raise the resources that we need domestically to deal with our development concerns. There is an estimate I'll give that in Africa, the continent loses almost $90 billion annually to illicit financial flows.
90 billion.
Yes, 90 billion USD from the continent. About 60% of this usually comes from trade misinvoicing and tax evasion. And that is why usually when we talk of IFFs, the concern and the emphasis is always on taxation, because the chunk is on trade misinvoicing, customs, more practices. That is where the chunk of the money comes from. In Ghana, there was a study that was conducted by one of our partners, ISEP, and they put it that between 1960, just right after our Independence Day, to 2012, the country lost some $40 billion to illicit financial flows.
Well, that's on the average. Could be more.
Could be more. I mean, this is just an estimate. And I mean, just your question as to the impact of this on DRM, domestic revenue mobilization and development, that is sufficient money to pay off all our debts as a country. But that is monies that we lost through illicit financial flows. And the numbers get even more startling if you look at cocoa, if you look at gold, and just to add to what Evelyn said, was it 2015 thereabout, government did introduce a withholding tax on, export of gold. Suddenly, we saw a very massive decline in the volume of gold and the value of gold that we were exporting as a country. At the same time, we saw one of our neighboring countries suddenly record a very high increase in the volume of gold because they don't have a withholding tax. So effectively, our porous borders means that once you introduce these things, immediately people just try to smuggle it through other countries. And so we'll come to talk about the solutions and how we can deal with this. But just in a nutshell, illicit financial flows, it's so significant. It's not just in Ghana, across the continent. Unfortunately, the ones that concern us the most usually is that of corruption. But bribery and corruption as a component of illicit financial flows constitutes, per the estimates, just about 10% of the 90 billion that we lose from the continent.
10% of 90 billion is enough money.
It is.
We are running around looking for 3 billion with,
I know, yeah. So it's quite significant, about 10 billion for 55 African countries, 54, depending on who is talking about. So yeah, it is still significant, and it is that which annoys us as citizens the most. And so we need to talk about it and deal with it. Money laundering is again, one of the major avenues for illicit financial flow. In the past few years, Ghana has made significant strides in this area. We established the Financial Intelligence Center. We have, yesterday Dan mentioned it here, we have been part of the OECD's Global Forum. And the Global Forum, what it does is to encourage the exchange of information between and among countries, right? We are just one of 5 African countries that, as at now, do have what we call the automatic exchange of financial information. And so what this means is that at the end of every year, specifically in September, about 150 countries across the world will send all the financial accounts information of all Ghanaian citizens that are in those countries to the Ghana Revenue Authorities. And we have been receiving this information since 2021. If you hold an account, Alfred, if you hold accounts in the UK, US, whatever you have in those accounts, every September, the US government, the UK government will send this information. They do send it to the Ghana Revenue Authority. So they know whatever monies every Ghanaian is holding across over 150 countries. And the idea is that, and we also send this information to these other countries.
I see.
Is to help these countries to be able to tell, if there are any unlikely monies moving around, and they will call you, invite you for a conversation.
Well, but that excludes the monies held in these shell companies and tax havens, because we've seen a lot going into those areas, is it not?
No, that is true. The tax havens are a problem, but you would realize that this whole idea of the Global Forum, the exchange of information, is to do away with the idea of tax secrecy, financial account secrecy. And so you could see, if you see the number, Ghana in 2011, we were actually, for example, forced to become a member of the Global Forum. Because in 2007, the then government had announced an intention to establish what they call the Ghana International Financial Center. And that concept was to enable us to provide, secrets and offshore accounting services to other countries, because those countries that had done it in the past, they were cheating on the whole global, financial system, but they made a lot of money. So we had announced that we wanted to do some, and then we were reported to the OECD that this country, they want to go the wrong way. So they forced us to effectively join the Global Forum. They subjected us to audit, and that is how we adopted and eventually abandoned that idea, But increasingly, at about 156 countries currently as members of the Global Forum, so they share information, they distribute. Over time, I'm sure the whole world is going to be part. And if you are not part of it, if you are subjected to sanctions, you are grey listed, and it comes with all sort of implications. So eventually we are going to resolve that, and we're going to have more countries, if not all countries, on this transparency thing. And that is the only way we can deal with the issue of money laundering and all these illicit financial flows.
Perfect. So I mean, your organization has been leading together with others also this advocacy and the fight against corruption in this country. I'm sure it's a huge one for you. You've been doing this for only God knows how long. But to the extent that those who are supposed to carry out the laws and implement and execute the laws in the fight against corruption, which is another avenue for IFFs, are in some instances the beneficiaries of the acts of corruption. How troubling is this? So for instance, we mentioned illegal mining. There's a CDD report that points to the fact that Galamsey is one of the major sources of political party financing in this country. Electoral Commission is supposed to demand the sources of funding for political parties. They are not doing that. So the political parties get funding from all sorts of places, including these illegal miners. And there was an MP who was telling me just about 2 months ago that an illegal miner in his constituency came to put 12 million CDs on his table to fund his campaign for this election. He's looking at me and asking me if he should reject it or take it. If he were you, what would you tell him? Sammy?
Well, I would have told him to reject the.
You would tell
money.
him to reject it?
Yes.
And you would expect him to reject it?
Well, I would tell him to reject it. What he does with it is his own issue. But the biggest thing is that we have corruption making up anything between 5 and 10% of the total IFFs, right? And it has become an avenue by which people are able to move money made from corruption out of Ghana into places where it's easy for them to have access and spend the money without any investigation or without any eye on them. And like you said, we have seen illegal mining, money from that finding its way into funding political parties. And for us, it only perpetuates the cycle of corruption, because then we are going to elect into office people who are already compromised, and they will not be able to, implement the laws to ensure that we break that cycle of corruption. But this whole thing about IFFs go beyond what we see. It affects development of this country as we know it, by draining away from us the money that we could have gotten to use to develop. Like Isaac was saying, if between 1960 and 2012 Ghana lost $90 billion, that's money that could have gone into paying off our debts and setting up this country, very, very well. Apart from that, government spend in capital areas and in social services is also reduced, because government is already not getting enough, to pass around. So when we look at our spending on health, and some few months back at a program, we found out that a lot of our oil money is being spent obviously on the free SHS. Yeah. We're spending just about anything between 5 and 10% on health. Sure. So instantly you see that one very important social sector is suffering, and when we do not make enough so that we can allocate around, then we are going to have a lot more of this. And we also see growth contracting, because once government cannot spend, then it means that avenues for jobs is going to close. And when that happens, then the same GRA will also not be able to raise some of the taxes. So we see the economy contracting, then we are into financial crisis. So it's a big thing. The corruption aspect makes it worse, because it perpetuates what happens. Once we are allowing compromised people into office, it's going to be difficult, keeping tabs on the other. And when you look at the literature, it will tell you that proceeds of corruption, maybe 5 to 10%. You have proceeds of crime from drug sales and all of those things, making up roughly maybe 15% of it. All the others is from, trade misinvoicing and the other, practiced by the multinational companies that, deny us of that amount. So when we have compromised people in office, then who is going to ensure that the proceeds of crime is reduced?
Right.
Who is going to give some kind of capacity support to our agencies to be sure that all of this misinvoicing, transfer pricing, we have the capacity to deal with it? I know, well, I heard that the Ministry of Finance has a transfer pricing unit. That's great. But are we constantly giving them the needed support so that they stay ahead of the curve? Because people who are engaged in corruption, who are engaged in crime, who are engaged in these IFFs are constantly looking for newer ways to move money around. So we need to have our agencies given the needed capacity to stay either at par with them or to stay ahead of the curve. So when we allow proceeds of corruption, right, to do all that it does in this country, including funding political parties, then we are only deepening the IFF's problem. We are not giving ourselves a chance at fighting the problem. Then it's going to affect all our other social sectors. And because we have a lot more women, children, vulnerable people who depend on these services, they are when Shraj and Ghana Statistical Service did their survey, right? One of the findings was that it was very likely for males to be asked to pay bribes, and males were more likely to pay the bribes. Why were they paying these bribes? To access social services. Instantly, what it means is that women's access, and not only women, but vulnerable people's access to social services is reduced. Because if you cannot pay the bribe, then how can you access the service? But it also leads us to something we call sextortion, where if the woman is unable to cough up the money to pay the bribe, then she has to use her body to pay the bribe. So we have to find means of keeping tabs, especially on the process of corruption as part of IFS, because if we don't do that, then we are undermining the whole
It's even more troubling when you have the compromised persons who are the beneficiaries of the acts of corruption being in offices where they are supposed to check the corruption. There will be little or no motivation to do so.
So then that would even drive us into areas where people lose trust in state agencies anyway. And if you look at, our recent Afrobarometer scores, you keep seeing that trust in state agencies is dipping. It's telling us something. If we allow political parties to be funded by illegal funds, then we are going to have compromised people in office. When we have compromised people in office, trust in state institutions go down, inequality gets widened, social services are either poorly provided or not provided at all. Then we have people who depend a lot more on these services. Vulnerable people, women, and sometimes men, we like to think that we are immune from these things, but we are not. When it gets to you see that you are no different from the woman who is suffering from these things. So I think that yes, corruption as part of the IFFs, and we are going to see an increase because when people realize that there's an avenue for us to move money out, then they are going to use that, and we have to deal with that.
And Evelyn, I'll come to you again, because while discussing this, we bear in mind, narrate down on how this is impacting on the provision of critical services to women, especially like healthcare that Sami touched on a number of times. Because as for the oil money, it's gone, at least based on policy now the policy direction of this administration having the ABFA about 60 to 70% of the annual budget funding amount going into free SHS, so you would have about 10% going into health. That poses a challenge. But for IFFs itself, Evelyn, how does that also impact on the provision of critical services like health care and others to women?